Bull, what can I do for you?
I want ice.
Ice. As in drink? At 4:25 in the afternoon? I knew I never should have gotten you that box set of Mad Men for Christmas.
Well, the trial starts tomorrow. We got a defendant who's convinced we can't win, a lawyer who's convinced he's going to hell, and no murder weapon.
Okay, I'm sorry, what do you mean, murder or weapon?
The fentanyl. We don't know how Emily got the fentanyl, and until we do, the jury is going to think that she got it from Adam.
Well, I know Cable gave Danny a lead on someone in Emily's support group, a girl who lives upstate, someone Emily was talking to every single day until about 5 months ago. Danny's hoping maybe she can tell us something.
There's also something going on between Emily's parents. It's not just grief, there's some kind of disconnect. I saw it at the courthouse.
I can ask Cable to do a deep dive on their emails and texts, see what you can find. You're not really worried, are you?
You know, when I was a kid, when I'd screw up, get in trouble, make bad choices, my grandfather would say to me, "There's a good man in there somewhere. We just got to keep you alive till you're 26. That kid. And the way he loved that girl. The fact he was willing to step in at that moment when she needed him. And damn the consequences. There's a good man in there."
Thank you so much.
Wow, that clip is intense.
It's intense.
This new
I'm curious
season.
why 26 is the cutoff, though? Is that when you become a man or we give up? I'm not sure.
It's so rare you see him so reflective. I'm worried. I'm worried about Dr. Bull. What's going on? What's going on with this season? Come on.
You should worry about Dr. Bull because you're a fan of the first season. I'm very grateful. And the first season is where we explain to everybody what trial science is, what jury consulting is. The second season is you find out why we do it, who does it, and what it means to us. So it's a much more personal approach to the television show, and you learn a lot about Dr. Bull. You learn about that right there. You learn about their families. You learn a lot about Marissa Morgan, who I get to play. She has a love interest. So it's a much more personal approach to
love interest. Come on, let's talk about that. Come on.
Well, it's pretty good. That's kind of juicy. They let it out slowly. He's been cast. I had my first makeout session on camera, which was pretty exciting.
Normal day in the office.
Well, maybe. Season 2, get ready.
I love it. I just want to get to the beginning of the show, you know, what you thought about the character of Marissa and what appealed about the scripts.
Well, again, I'm saying the first season, Bull was introducing what trial science is. So my character, it's about this guy named Dr. Jason Bull, who is a trial scientist. He has 3 PhDs in psychology, and we're always curious what that means.
A lot of big words
exactly.
being thrown around, basically.
Neurolinguistics expert over here. That's what I get to be. So, but what my character does, Marissa Morgan is the person who used to work for Homeland Security. She created a matrix, which takes into account out of all the jurors that we have, we get information about them, sex, race, education, where they live, where they came from, what they like to eat. We put that into this matrix, and then at the same time, we do these mock juries where we have people actually attached to devices where we can read their blood pressure, their body temperature, their pulse. And then we get to decide, we get to predict, rather, how these people are going to vote. And it's pretty fascinating. And it's in like 95% accuracy. And then what happens to throw us off track is there's always somebody who's, you know, the one who gets away. Maybe somebody who took a bribe, maybe somebody who has a secret that we don't know. So it's always the unexpected path to finding justice.
What fascinated, I mean, there's so much fascinating about this. I mean, what fascinated you about the character and what you learned about these practices? I mean, it's based on, there's an actual career around this, right?
Bull is actually inspired by the career of Dr. Phil McGraw. Now, Dr. Phil McGraw, you guys probably know him from his
just
talk
Dr.
show.
Phil. You can just say Dr. Phil.
Yeah, Dr. Phil. Okay, I can call him Dr. Phil McGraw, but that's me. So he actually worked for Oprah when Oprah was in trouble with the meat industry. She credited him because she hired his team of jury consultants to help her with her case. We like to say, get her off. Dr. Jason Bull gets her off. But in any event, that's what he did, and she credited him. And to understand what those people do, he was very prolific, but it was a very different time because there was no social media. So what our show does is it marries what jury consulting was at the time that Dr. Phil did it and what happens now, because this actually happens. I know you guys have all seen, procedural shows. I'm a big fan of Law and Order, every single one that ever was. I've been on them. But this show is different because it's what happens when they pick juries. And how they tailor a case to what your issues are. And it's true and it's fascinating. And your social footprint is out there forever. And people are making judgments about you. It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, the selection process is a huge part of going to jury. I mean, one of the people like lawyers are spending all this time researching who's coming in, doing all those background checks, and like you mentioned.
Well, in the old days, they used to actually get PIs. And when you're called for jury duty, and I don't know how many of you have served, but when you're called for jury duty, 300 people are actually called in. Then whoever shows up, then who's ever selected. In the old days, they used to hire PIs, and they would follow you and, see what public records they were and see where you lived. And if you had a job that paid a lot of money, but you lived in a small apartment, what did that mean about how you spend? But now it's a lot easier because you think of every picture you post, every like you have, every comment you make that says something about you. And there are people paying attention to that, and there are algorithms that actually can figure out what that means. Now, I think I sound smart, but that's actually
You're coming across very smart.
Yes.
I feel so dumb right now. Tell me about meeting Dr. Phil and what he told you about it.
Well, this was kind of crazy because I was cast. It was the very first actor cast. So I was cast before Michael, and I was cast before I got to meet Dr. Phil. Now, Dr. Phil actually co-wrote the script with Paul Attanasio, who's an amazing writer. He wrote House, Homicide, Life on the Streets. And so they wrote this together. So I got cast. So when it was time for me to have my interview with him, the whole time I'm terrified that he's going to let me go or he's not going to like me.
How do you meet him? Where do you meet him? Set the scene a little bit.
You meet him in the lobby of a very fancy hotel.
Of course.
Right off Central Park West. They serve you coffee. He's late. He is taller than you can possibly imagine. I mean, he is a Texan through and through. So he comes in and he's an intimidating figure, but he's got washed out jeans. I wanted to redo those jeans. That's the only thing that I could tell he wasn't from the city. He's a showman. He really gives a presentation. He told me a lot about some of the cases that they tried, and something that was really important to him that I think that we've fully embraced on the show is this is a wildly expensive thing to do. So you tend to think it's only the very wealthy. But it was really important to him to do pro bono work because picking a jury is how you win a case. It's picking a jury and tailoring the case to that jury is how you win. And he did a lot of pro bono. And so you'll see like this clip that we saw today that's on tonight. Michael actually sees this kid charged with this murder in court. And the amazing thing about his character and about Michael, and I'm going to talk to you about that later, is that he sees that something's not right, that this kid shouldn't be tried for this murder. And he just snoops around. And then when he decides to take the case, he has to find out how to pay for it. And there's something really cool about that. So Dr. Phil was passionate about doing that. The other thing that was interesting is I'm actually based on a real person. Now, the only thing we have in common is we're blonde. She's a brainiac. She's actually still a very successful jury consultant down in Texas. Dr. Phil, she was his right hand. He trained her, and I got to see a picture, but I was intimidated.
You said any phone calls? Have you talked to her, or is it just okay?
No. The only thing I know is that Dr. Phil said she was, smart as a whip, but she used to go into court in these very short skirts, and a lot of judges had a problem with that. So one day a judge said, either change or get out of my courtroom. So she had to go borrow someone's suit jacket and put it on her knees to come back into the courtroom. So.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned Michael. We got to talk about Michael Weatherly.
We got to talk about Michael Weatherly.
He's so fantastic. I mean,
Fantastic.
what was it like first meeting him and working with him?
Well, it was terrifying because, again, I had been cast initially, and then they cast Michael. Interestingly enough, they tailored the script to him, and I think they're doing that even more so the second season. But that first meeting, I was just convinced he was going to say, yeah, this lady, nah, I don't like her. So I was very nervous the entire
Really
time.
down yourself. You're fantastic. You're so good on the show. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. And he's an incredibly generous actor. We have a great group of actors. And there's something about on-screen chemistry that you can't deny. And it's just something that's there. And with Michael, he's like a brother. The minute I met him, I think that I say to people, we're like two kittens from the same litter. We have seemingly absolutely nothing in common from our backgrounds, but we're so similar the way we approach things. We're both type A, energetic, a little Pollyanna positive. It's just a thing.
I mean, you guys have a great rapport on screen. I mean, it seems so fun. He's obviously throwing off flippant remarks. Are you breaking?
You've met
is
him,
it
I
easy?
gather.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Tell me, is it hard to film a scene with him, or are you guys sort of dialed in now? You guys have fun on set?
We've always had fun. He loves to make fun of people, and I think he told this story. In fact, I know he told the story when he was here. He likes to play tricks on people, and I'm a little frenetic, if you can't tell. And he gave me a scare once in the hallway. He kind of popped out of hair and makeup as I was walking through, and I literally had a night terror while I was awake and just could not stop screaming. So I think he's learned, don't ever scare me. I'm not good on Halloween.
You don't work well on the horror scenes or anything like that. I mean, is there a particular episode or case that particularly fascinated you, maybe? I mean, they're all so dramatic and fascinating. Some of them seem like they're based on true events in some way.
Well, it's interesting you say that. We try not to be inspired by the headlines like other shows, but I think what's ironic is when people write, and they've written these in advance, that sometimes it mirrors what's happening in society. So we have one coming up that is about a hazing incident gone wrong, and a young man died. And ironically, that was written before anything went down. So there's something about the writer's room, I have to say, that is almost like telepathic, because we have a new team of writers, and this amazing showrunner, Glenn Gordon Caron, who was the creator of Moonlighting and Medium, which I think is going to give you an idea of how the new show is going to go, because now that we've explained what trial science is, we're going to show you who the people are that practice it. And if you think of his shows, you don't remember the crimes, but you remember the people. And I think that's what he's going to focus on.
Absolutely. And have you found yourself learning anything about these practices, about the modern tech world, that sort of thing, living in this character as you have?
I can barely check my email. In fact, my phone broke, and I'm hoping a young person will help me change it. No, but I think we do learn about people, and I think that's, the clip that we saw. Michael is a psychologist. I'm a neurolinguistics expert. I can't even say that. But I think that if you look at the show, I'm the science and the facts and the brain and logic, and he is everything that is emotional and visceral and based on feelings and intuition. And that's really exciting, because mostly, in most shows, it's the opposite. Women are the people who are in touch with feelings. But in our show, it's the opposite, and so I think that we balance each other really well. So it's nice as, a dumb blonde to get to play a smart one.
Absolutely. I mean, I love about this show as well is there's obviously storylines that are furthering, but there's also, you can jump in, whenever you want and sort of go back. I mean, are there a couple things that you love sort of watching the evolution of that you're excited to see, for people to see?
Well,
in the second
selfishly, Marissa Morgan is really coming into her own, and there's something about being a woman past 40 who's still viable and interesting and passionate about her career. She's single, not because, she hasn't found anyone or she's picky or crazy, but she's a woman who's making it on her own. And yet, in this season, I meet a man, and he seems on the outset to be perfect, good-looking and charismatic. He's played by the very attractive, wonderful, talented Gary Wilms. But we don't know yet what's going to happen with him. And he's already forcing Marissa, because I've shot several times with him already, because we're 9 episodes in now. He's taught her a lot about who she is, what she's willing to sacrifice, and how can she trust someone. And you learn a lot about her, and you learn a lot about her relationship with Dr. Bull, because they're close friends, and there's a friend chemistry between them that I think hasn't existed on television before. You know, that guy can pretty much bet anyone.
You're always
Except her.
assuming that someone's in the room, he's probably going to go there with her.
Oh, heavens, yeah, it's Michael Weatherly. Have you met him? Absolutely. And I think that's sexy and exciting. And you're learning about him this season that he can get any girl in the room, but can he keep her? Does he know which one he really should be with? And it's interesting to see people who represent the rest of us because we haven't gotten it right. A lot of people haven't gotten it right. I certainly haven't gotten it right. But I love that a television show that people are able to see that and see that they're represented on television. Sometimes we show perfection, and I think last season, Dr. Bull was a little perfect, and I like that he's not so perfect. And Marissa, you know, type A, get everything right, smarty pants. She makes some bad choices, and she loses control.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear about, I mean, you've been on a number of sets, you've guest starred on a number of great shows. Was there anything you learned through that process or meeting those actors that you took into being your first sort of series regular in such a fantastic show?
Yes, and that is a great question because obviously I would have liked to have had my big break come 15 years ago, but the fact that it happened so late and I had been a guest star so many times, it's so wonderful to arrive now and to know what to value. And in television, they say everything starts with a number one because on the call sheet, it's the actors. And Michael's our number one, an amazing guy. But 2 years ago, I actually did a guest spot on SVU with Mariska Hargitay, and I had worked on that show a couple of times. But it was a very challenging show. You know, those shows, you gotta cry for days. And it was really great to see a woman in the number one position and a show that is so serious and heartfelt. And she has a real loose demeanor. She's very kind to people on the set. And it was great to see that. It was great to see so many different shows and how they run them. And recently I was at a party and I ran into a gentleman, I did Hope and Faith with Kelly Ripa. And I remember I told him when I went back to my dressing room at the end of that show, I went in the dressing room and I cried. And I thought, it's never going to be this good. It was so good. And I've been very lucky that every job has kind of topped the next. And it's unbelievable that 15 years in, this show, it still feels brand new, but I do feel more prepared from having worked on so many different shows.
Were there any great comedy sets or anything that you got to sort of do a little ridiculous stint on?
Well, Sex and the City, I got to deliver Miranda's baby, and that was pretty
Being
exciting.
part of the zeitgeist right there, that's impressive.
It was called I Heart New York, and it was right before September 11th. I was actually on tour and wasn't in New York. I was in Canada. But that was a great episode to be a part of because it celebrated what New York is, and I think September 11th, as horrific as that day will always be, we were able to rely on each other in this city and in this country.
Speaking of New York, I'd love to talk about Broadway, and obviously it's
Oh,
so
me too.
fantastic in Hand to God. I mean, tell me about that process and getting that role and discovering that character.
Hand to God, you know.
Marjorie, yeah, so
Marjorie
fantastic.
Stevens, I miss that woman so much. Hand to God was a play written by Rob Askins, and anybody out there who's trying to be an actor, my best advice to you is take any work you can possibly get. So I worked for many years for free, and I worked at a theater called EST, met Rob Askins. He was working with a company called Youngblood where they develop talent under 30. And he met me, he met Stephen Boyer, and he thought, oh, I'd like to write a play for these two. And he wrote this insane, delicious, wonderful, violent, totally moving play about a mother and a son dealing with the death of the father, and the son then, she creates a puppet ministry for teens, which if you're from the South like I am is very common, and his son gets possessed by the devil, or not. And Marjorie Stevens has her own issues with anger and violence and probably addiction, and there's a 15-year-old boy involved that I don't even want to tell you what happens with him. It's ugly if you haven't seen it. But getting to do that show, you know, we were a bunch of people just working, nobodies. We went from off-Broadway to off-Broadway to MCC. We then got taken to Broadway, and to go to Broadway with your friends and then take it by storm was unbelievable. We got nominated. There were 5 nominations.
Tony's, absolutely. You guys had so many nominations. You had a nomination. There we go.
I gave it to Helen Mirren. She deserved it.
Okay, that was very kind of you. Tell me a little bit about working with puppets. I mean, did you ever imagine that your career would go that way? And what was that like? Was there any nights that were kind of extraordinary?
I was terrified of that puppet. The first time we ever did a reading of that show, Rob called us and said, hey, Steve, Geneva, I've written this play. Would you do a reading? And There's a puppet in it. We're going to bring an oven mitt just so that we have something to have. So Stephen Googled easiest puppet to make. It was sock puppet. So he made a sock puppet. And I am telling you from the get-go, Stephen Boyer was two different people. And, they used to have to say to some of the actors, please look at Tyrone the puppet when you're talking to him. And you didn't have to tell me that. There's a picture that I have framed where Tyrone is yelling at me and I'm cowering in utter fear because it was two different people. And that experience then, Steven Spielberg saw that show and he's our lead producer on Bull. So I can't help thinking I have to thank him for that I'm standing here.
No, absolutely. I love it. I'd love to hear about you also were recently on a Woody Allen set. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that? I'm so excited for this film.
I am too. It was amazing because I shot with Kate Winslet. Now, Woody has, everybody when you work with Woody, they say, be careful and, First of all, he's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. He's so chill. I don't know why I anticipated otherwise. The only caveat is you arrive with your page and a half of dialogue and no one's told you what the movie's about.
Are you serious? So you have no idea? You just have your dialogue?
They called me the night before and said it's an ice cream parlor. What kind of ice cream? Low fat, vanilla,
Very specific about the ice cream, but everything
full
else.
Full fat chocolate, that's all I go for. And other than that, I won't touch it. So Kate Winslet got the air and I got the real ice cream. And we show up and, we're about to go and they all whisper in hushed tones. And then I said, Kate, I'm sorry, what is this? Do I like you? I don't know what's happening. Oh, no, you're my only friend. And she had explained the whole thing to me. And I kept thinking I was being pumped because there was another joke in it. And then Woody directed us. And the amazing thing about him is everybody says 1 or 2 takes. But he wasn't getting what he wanted. So he would say, yeah, listen, would you mind, Kate? And she would try it again. And finally he said, gosh, I don't know what to tell you. Just improvise. So I got to improvise with Kate.
It's amazing.
And one of my favorite moments is she said, gosh, am I pretty? And I said, oh my God, you're gorgeous. You're on me. You're so attractive. We'll see if it doesn't make the cutting room floor. But I don't care because it was such a thrill. He was so kind and so creative. At the end of the day, he came up to her and said, I really had an idea of my head of what I wanted. And you ended up giving me something I didn't even know that I wanted. And I liked it better, or maybe I'm hungry.
High praise. That's amazing. I love that. We have some questions in the audience, so we're going to go there.
Hey, Geneva. So getting to work on Bull, I was wondering, has working on the show given you a broader sense of how the legal or the courtroom system works, on the jury side?
That's a very good question. I've actually sat on a jury. And it would have been very interesting if people had been studying us because it didn't go the way I thought it would go. It was a rape case. It was pretty intense. And I will say, if you ever get called for jury duty, you have to serve because you feel incredibly patriotic after it's over. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Yeah, it almost makes me a little scared, though. I mean, I'm posting with caution now, I'll tell you that.
Social media is not a safe zone, is what you're saying.
I don't think so. I don't know. Be careful about what you post, young man. That's all I'm going to say.
Great advice, great advice. Okay, next question.
Hi, Geneva.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you.
So I loved Hand to God, and I was wondering, do you think Broadway is something you'll do again?
God, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I saw Dear Evan Hansen, and I started singing lessons because, listen, I'll carry a spear on Broadway again. I love the theater, and I see tons of it, and I hope on hiatus I can fill in for someone or do something. Absolutely.
Well, we hope so, too. One last question.
Hi.
Hi. This is someone I know.
No, I'm just kidding. Just want to ask you, what's the biggest difference between doing theater and TV, and do you miss being on stage?
I love acting so much that I would act on stage. I would, go to a grocery store and act out, the cash register. The biggest difference is the audience. You don't have that immediate response, and I've never done drugs, so say no to drugs. However, I have a feeling that being in front of a live audience is like drugs because you do it with the show, so every show is different because you feel them. And when you're on television, as fun as it is, and it's very exciting, and you'll occasionally get a laugh, it's a different medium. So I love them both, but there's something really special about theater, as this young lady knows.
Well, before you see her back on theater, watch her on Bull, CBS. Tonight is a new episode, absolutely. Yeah. One more round of applause for Geneva Carr, guys.
Thank you so much.